So, okay, in this video, we're going to talk about proofreading your written assignments. Now, many students do not proofread their assignments, and we're talking mainly from the perspective of a group project that different persons may be working on different aspects of it, and they simply send their part that they were working on, and you could actually see the different quality in the different pieces that each student would have contributed. So you could see some persons have a good command of the standard English, so you could see that in their part. You could see some persons with a not so good command, you could pick that up. If you proofread your assignments, if someone proofread the assignments, you can get rid of all these issues of different fonts, different writing style, different writing competencies. You can get rid of these issues if you're proofreading your assignments before you submit your reports. And it's not just about a group assignment, an individual assignment as well. You can pay attention to the rules of vocabulary, the rules of grammar, the rules of academic writing, and proofread your written assignments before submitting. And it does a lot for you. So in this video, we want to talk about proofreading your written assignments. And there are several reasons to proofread. One, you never know where your written work would end up, or who's going to be reading your work, who's going to be the final person that would be reading your work. And because of that, you may be have an interview to do at a future point, and at that point when you're doing your interview, you realize that the person who is interviewing you has a copy of some of your written work. So you never know where your written work would end up, so it's always useful to proofread. A second thing, we would not have an opportunity to instantly explain things to our readers, things that they may not understand. So if you're making mistakes in your writing, you cannot clear these mistakes up because somebody wouldn't be there saying, what exactly did you mean here? Remember, they say communicating effectively is not simply communicating in a way that one could be misunderstood or could be understood. It's communicating in a manner where one cannot possibly be misunderstood. Proofreading allows you to get rid of things that may serve as misunderstanding by your reader. And finally, it speaks to our credibility and professionalism. The impression that someone has of you could be reinforced, or it could be reduced, or it could be enhanced based on your written communication. And for these simple reasons, you should think about proofreading all your written documents. Now, I've spent a lot of time marking students' assignments through the years, and there are several issues that I identify. One, writing the way we speak. We need to talk about that. Issues with punctuation. We need to talk about that. Abuse of capitalization. Disregard for the 6 C's of writing. Spelling issues. Failure to reference. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, unwillingness to proofread. Some of us, we simply do not care to proofread our assignments. We want to just get them over with and get them out of the way. High quality reports or high quality assignments are not necessarily because the persons are super competent, but because they take their time to go over, to read over, and make sure that they're comfortable saying what they really want to say. So let's look at some of these issues in a little more detail. Writing the way we speak. For different reasons, many of us do not speak formally to each other. We may use a dialect specific to us, and in the use of such dialect, the vocabulary and grammar may be confusing to others. As I indicated earlier, we never know where our written work will end up or who may be reading it. Moreover, written communication does not provide the luxury of that instant clarification and elaboration. As such, every effort must be made to use standard rules of vocabulary and grammar, and best as possible avoid slangs, jargons, and colloquialism. Colloquialism is casual conversation. Jargons are language specific to a group or specific to a vocation or a workplace. We try to avoid these things, and we try to be formal in our writing. Now, as I mentioned, there are several issues with punctuation. I'm going to go over some of them here. There are several punctuation marks, and we must know what happens with them, how to behave in relation to these punctuation marks. Now, there's the period or the full stop, and that is the most commonly used punctuation mark, and it is relatively straightforward. It goes at the end of a sentence or at the end of a statement. One of the more common mistakes that I've seen in relation to not just the period or the full stop, but punctuation marks is that students often click a space after the last letter of the word that precedes the punctuation mark and then has the punctuation mark standing alone. Let me try to clear up a little bit more what I just said there. So we have a sentence here: I would pay her a visit today. The period comes directly after the Y. In some cases, students use a space and then put the period. Now, I think they may have gotten that from predictive language on phones when sending text messages or WhatsApp text or something like that. But it's wrong. Your punctuation mark comes directly after the last letter of the last word. In mostly all cases, the exception would be the dash, which we will talk about in a bit. Good. Now, you use a full stop as well for indirect speech. So Sherry asked if she was part of the team. Now, notwithstanding she asked a question, you do not put a question mark here because you're using indirect speech, and in that case you would use a period as well. Sometimes you find students using a question mark there, which is erroneous. You also find students using two periods at the end of a sentence if they believe that. So here's this example: my favorite football club is Chelsea FC. Now, at the end of the C, there's a period. Notwithstanding that is the end of a sentence, you don't need to put a second period there. Good. Some people make that mistake. Also, when you're using words like doctor, when you've abbreviated words like doctor, Mr., etc., et al., you need to put the period there. Some people neglect to put the period there. You need to. And of course, if these are ending the sentence, you do not need to put an additional period, as I just mentioned. Question mark. Question mark is extremely straightforward. You need to put a question mark at the end of a question. When you ask a question, you need to put your question mark, and of course the question mark goes directly after the last letter. Also, if it's a request that is being made, you would also use a question mark at the end of the request that is being made. Straightforward. The colon. Now, the colon is a punctuation mark that is used to call attention to what is likely to come next. And you could call attention to what is likely to come next in the form of a word, a phrase, a sentence, or even a list. Here's an example. Their crime fighting plan is based on one thing only. You put your colon and you use the word aggression, because it's almost as if you're saying their crime fighting plan is based on one thing only. Pay attention. It's based on aggression. So you want to call people's attention, so you use the colon. You could use, as I mentioned, a phrase after your colon. Here's the example. Their crime fighting plan is based on one thing only: using aggression against citizens. You could use a sentence after a colon. Their crime fighting plan is based on one thing only: colon. They use aggression against citizens. So it's actually two sentences there, but you want to call attention to the second part of it, so you use the colon. There's a relationship between the first part and the second part, and you want to call attention to that relationship, so you use a colon. And as I mentioned, you could use the colon to draw attention to a list of things or a series of things. For example, their crime fighting plan is based on several areas: aggression, intimidation, and coercion. the semicolon. And the semicolon, they say it's one of the punctuation marks that you could actually do without in the English language, but it is useful and it demonstrates a sophistication or skill in your writing. Now, a semicolon is a pause just as a comma would be, but it's usually used as a pause between two sentences that are joined to show relationship. I am not going today. That could be a sentence by itself. I am feeling tired. That could be a sentence by itself. But when I use a semicolon there, I am not going today. I am feeling tired. It's a shorter pause than a full stop or a period, and it shows the relationship between the first part of what I said and the second part of what I am saying. So the semicolon, it has its function. The comma. The comma is used for a pause between what we want to say. So it could be a pause between our phrases, a pause between items that we're listing, or simply to give that little breather between what we're saying. Now, one of the challenges, here's an example. Several teams I plan to read upon today: Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Manchester United. One of the challenges is that people often say that you do not need to use a comma after the second to last item when you're listing things. But that is optional. If you choose to use a comma, nothing is wrong with it. If you do not use a comma, nothing is wrong with it. But I tend to use a comma in an instance like that. The apostrophe. The apostrophe does two things. One, it helps with contracting words or phrases, and it also shows possession. And some of the frequently made mistakes in this regard, in terms of contracting is used for informal writing, or it's used for conversation. You do not use contracting in formal writing. So for example, there would be no don't, or you would use do not. There would be no can't, you would use cannot. Shouldn't, wouldn't, couldn't. These contractions are not used in formal academic writing. In terms of possessiveness, it's often straightforward that you use apostrophe S if you're going to show possessiveness. For example, John's car, or John's house, or John's vehicle. Now, the confusion is if a person's last name, or if the item, the noun or pronoun that we're using, end with a S already, do we use an apostrophe S again, or do we simply use the apostrophe only? Now, this may sound controversial, but in most cases, you simply use an apostrophe. However, in rules of academic writing, it seems as if apostrophe S, it's okay to use apostrophe S in the case of a person's name. Like Charles, you could just use the apostrophe, or you could also use the apostrophe S. But if you're talking about plural already, for example, the students' assignments, students already have an S at the end of it, so you simply use the apostrophe only in a case like that. And those are some of the more frequently occurring issues in relation to an apostrophe with students' work. Now, I shared with you some of the concerns with punctuation. Let me share with you some concerns with capitalization. There are several students who tend to use capitalization whenever they feel like it, or for emphasis, or because they think that the point that they are going to make is worthy of capitalization. In some cases, they use a full, the entire word is uppercase. Now, capitalization, there are rules, and these rules need to be paid attention to for academic writing. I'm going to provide you with some uses of capitalization in your academic writing. Proper names. Proper names of people, places, and things are capitalized. Common nouns are only capitalized when they are essential parts of proper names. Second use, names of people and their languages. For example, we could say African, and that would be capitalized. You could say American, that would be capitalized. You could say Trinidadian, that would be capitalized. And their language, for example, here we have Swahili as a language, or English as a language, or French as a language. They must be capitalized. Names of geographical features, for example, somebody's address, proper name of a location, 5th Street, San Fernando Hills, the Red House, these are capitalized. Names of organizations are capitalized. For example, Maloney Pacers Basketball Club, the Boys and Girls Club, these would be capitalized. Names of days of the weeks, names of days of the week, or the months of the year, or public holidays, they are capitalized. Names of religions, they are capitalized. Words derived from proper names, for example, Africanized, Eastern, Southern, Northern, Marxist, these words are capitalized. Titles of persons, doctor, surgeon, lecturer, professor. First word of direct speech after your quotation marks, the first word of the direct speech is capitalized. Acronyms are capitalized, abbreviations are capitalized. So when you are using capitalization in your work, you could check against this list, these items on this list, to see to what extent, why am I using a capital letter here? Is it a proper use of capitalization in this case? So these are some of the things that we need to pay attention of in relation to capitalization. Now, there's the 6 C's of writing, and we're going to talk about them real briefly here. The first C is clarity, straightforward. When writing your essays or your written work, try to ensure that your thoughts are clear, and you follow up by ensuring that your expressions are clear. Be clear in your mind what you want to say, and make your best effort to express it in as clear a way as possible. And you could reread your work to ensure that you are being clear what you want to say is what you're actually saying. Keep in mind you would not be there to correct things or confusion that the reader may be having. Remember, clear language is simple, and draw examples from everyday life. I'm hoping that I am being clear in terms of what I'm sharing with you at this point. The second C is concreteness. The more concrete your essays are or your written work is, the more specific information it would convey. Ensure that your essays contain information that is solid, definite, and real. Avoid vagueness or unsupported ideas. As a person within academia, we do that. We avoid unsupported ideas. In terms of correctness in terms of demonstrating your use of the language is vital. Improper word choices and grammatical error can lower not only your examiner's perception but your reader's perception of your competence. There are certain things like malapropisms, which is confusion of words based on the similarity of sound. These can be quite damaging. So correctness in terms of your use of grammar, correctness in terms of your use of punctuation, correctness in terms of your spelling. Proofread and pay attention to these areas. Extremely important. Conciseness. This is the art of striving for brevity, using few words as necessary to convey the information that you need to convey. In many cases, you will get a word limit, and quite often people go over the word limit thinking that they need to use more and more words to say certain things. But the more skilled you become, the better you become at writing and at academic writing. The more you practice, the more you can be concise in terms of getting your message across. It was Mark Twain who said, "If I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter." So you may have to spend more time on your writing in order to have brevity and conciseness be a part of it, but strive for these areas. Completeness. Completeness refers to having all the necessary qualities to be considered a finished essay or finished piece of writing, ensuring that you have included all the information that can answer people's questions adequately in terms of what you're sharing, and inclusive of having an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. In terms of our introduction, we tend to say what you're going to say. In the body, we tend to say it, and in the conclusion, we tend to say what you've said. So in your introduction, make a focused statement that would prepare the reader for what is to come. And we would talk about a thesis statement in a bit. In your body, say it. Say what you say you're going to say. Discuss the points presented in your thesis statement and support them clearly. Try to provide adequate support for all the points you raised. Don't heavily support one point and then vaguely support the others. Organize your points in a logical manner and use transitions when moving from one point to another. And we will talk about coherence in a bit. Conclusion: say what you've said. Try to restate your thesis and a few sentences that show the main points that tie your entire essay or piece of work together in as few words as necessary. In your conclusion, do not raise points that you did not raise or that you cannot refer to in the body of your essay. And again, be mindful of your word limit. Coherence. Coherence is writing that is logical and consistent towards a unified whole, establishing and maintaining a clear focus for your writing. You need to develop a controlling idea for your writing, which is often referred to as your thesis, and informs your content and your approach. Your thesis would inform your content that is to follow and your approach. A thesis statement is an explicit declaration, usually in one sentence, of the main idea. It is usually placed in the beginning or sometimes the second paragraph of your introduction. If your work is going to be long, the thesis statement may be placed at the end of the introduction. You must be able to address the full scope of your thesis statement in your essay. You can also review your thesis statement after you have written your essay, if necessary, to accommodate the direction taken by your essay. So if you created your thesis statement and when you completed your body of your essay, you realize there's need to be done to improve your thesis statement, then you can do that. But when you're creating your thesis statement, you must ensure that the body of your essay or the work that you're going to present can treat with all aspects of your thesis statement. The main idea to be communicated in a paragraph may be declared at the beginning of the paragraph by what is known as your topic sentence. Paragraph unity is achieved by ensuring that every sentence in the paragraph is related to the topic sentence. In proofreading for paragraph unity, do the following. 1. Clearly identify the topic sentence for every paragraph. Now we're talking about coherence. We're talking about ensuring that there's a focus towards a unified whole. So a topic sentence would allow us to establish clearly in this paragraph, this is what we're going to be talking about. So clearly identify the topic sentence for each paragraph. Ensure that every sentence in the paragraph relates to the topic sentence. Any sentence that does not relate to the topic sentence should be removed from the paragraph. Keep in mind that it may fit in another paragraph. So it's not that we're going to get rid of that idea or that thought, but it does not relate to the topic sentence. So we're going to remove it from that and see where else it fits. Any sentence that is an almost fit should be rewritten until it fits with our topic sentence. It may even be possible to rewrite the topic sentence to accommodate an idea that is coherent with the paragraph being written. So we could tweak our topic sentence if we need to. We are interested in coherence, a decent read of the information that we are providing, and coherence is absolutely important. So these are the 6 C's of essay writing against which you could do your proofreading. Now, I've also discovered that many students have spelling errors, and while your spell check on your Microsoft Word system may correct words that are totally misspelled, words that are actual words that exist that are used inappropriately or spelled incorrectly for that context or purpose may not necessarily be flagged. Sometimes they may be flagged in green, or sometimes they may not necessarily be flagged, so you need to pay attention in that regard. You also need to pay attention to the fact that if your essay is being done with, I'm not going to go into types of referencing in this presentation here, but if you're using American English, you can't go switch from American English to UK English. You can't make these switches because they would be highlighted as spelling errors by your examiner. Notwithstanding, they may be overlooked depending on your settings on your Microsoft Word. So here's a list of frequently misspelled words that you could pay attention to. And what I'm encouraging you to do is create your own list of frequently misspelled words based on when you're proofreading your assignments. So we often see persons using loose as lose quite often, not knowing which fear to use. Not two, confusing effect and affect, great and great, quiet and quiet, access and access, lease and lease, story, story, wait, wait, waste, waste, there, weather, weather. So pay attention to these things. A lot is two words, a and the word lot. It's quite often written as one. Within some cases, it's people write two words and it is one. Maybe there's a lot of confusion here. Maybe it's possible in that context. Maybe it's now conditional. Throughout and throughout. Outweigh, outweigh, relationship, relationship, which I can't understand why, because relationship is one word. Notwithstanding, again, notwithstanding. So these are some frequently made errors. You could pay attention to these and you could create a list of errors that you make frequently that you may need to pay attention to when proofreading your presentation. Referencing your material, it's absolutely imperative that we give credit for ideas that we may have gotten from other people's writing or any citations that we would have made. Now, your program, your course, your university would guide you in terms of the way citations and referencing should be dealt with, and that's a presentation by itself. So in this presentation, I wanted to draw your attention to the need to proofread your written assignments before submitting them, to proofread your reports, to recognize that when you're working as part of a group, doing a group project, that some people may not necessarily, all members of the group may not necessarily have the skill to write well. All members may not necessarily have the concern of ensuring that they're writing well. And the fact that they are going to be contributing part, somebody must take the responsibility of proofreading to ensure the font is the same, the size of the font is the same, the type of the font is the same, and that they do care in terms of the quality of writing, in terms of the rules of grammar and the rules of vocabulary, in terms of spelling, in terms of capitalization, in terms of structure, in terms of the 6 C's. Someone must take due care to ensure that that is handled in relation to the report before it is submitted. And again, it's not just about your group project and these mistakes that may come with the group project. It's also about your individual writing. This is your opportunity to make a good impression to whoever may be reading your written work. This is your opportunity to ensure that somebody thinks highly of you, that they recognize that you're a clear thinker and that you express yourself with ease in writing, which is an extremely important skill for all organizations. Written communication is important for all organizations, and this is an opportunity for you to sell yourself. It's not difficult, but it requires awareness of what is required, and it also requires a willingness to practice and the discipline of taking the time to do what you have to do, whether or not you feel like it, whether or not you think it's necessary. It's important, and it requires you becoming that kind of individual who would look after this aspect of your performance, this aspect of your credibility, this aspect of selling yourself. So I hope the content provided in this video was useful. Wishing you guys all the best.